Tour guides of Reddit. What is the dumbest question someone asked during a tour? I'll post for my Scotland tour guide. So a few tours before my group was another group of Americans. This one bunch was quite observant, and we are having a great time, looking at farmland and such. This one lady spots a sheep with a dyed spot of wool, and with all seriousness, she asks, "Is that the way to tell what color wool the sheep will grow into?" Bless the lady for her response. Yes, keep an eye out for the tartan sheep. They are lovely this time of year. Once had a woman insist that she needed to spray herself with my bear spray because I could not make her understand that it does not work the same as insect repellent. She decided against taking the tour and called to yell at my boss over my refusal to spray her with bear spray. At what point do you just spray her with the bear spray? Well, obviously, if she tries to steal your picnic basket. Used to give tours of a historic wooden grain elevator and farm buildings from the early 1900s. Had a guest ask, "Isn't it amazing how much healthier everyone was back then, before we had all these chemicals?" At the time, we were standing next to a machine that was used to coat grain with formaldehyde to make it last longer. Oh god, I miss the good old days when everyone died of polio, worker safety and child labor laws were non-existent, asbestos, lead, and arsenic were in literally everything, and grain elevators were consistent fire traps that occasionally exploded and blew everyone inside to kingdom come. Yes, we all lived so much longer back then. Tourists in Dutch windmills always ask where the engine is. They don't believe the wind can rotate the blades for some reason. This gets asked way too often. Guy at Gettysburg saw the cannons pointing straight up as part of a gate/entrance. Asked if they were anti-aircraft guns. My girlfriend worked at the Sherlock Holmes Museum in London at 221B Baker Street, and apparently a surprising number of fully grown adults are under the impression that Sherlock Holmes is an actual living person who really lives there. The worst part was that they weren't allowed to disabuse the guests of their misconception, so when the guests would ask where is Sherlock Holmes, she'd have to say something like, "Oh, he's just out on a case at the moment." Seriously weird tbh. Why are there so many Asians here? Mate, it's an international school. I was a park ranger working at the information desk. A woman approached me to get a map. While we were talking, a bell started ringing. She asked about the bell, and I told her it was in the clock tower, and that it rang out the time every hour on the hour. She asked how many times it would toll, so I looked at my watch and said 12. She then said, 12? Why 12? What's the significance? I said, it's noon. I'm quite fond of all the people who sincerely believe that Disney World actually has a giant retractable dome that they can put up whenever it rains. Like seriously, the place is the size of a small city. Building a dome that size would be legit be one of the wonders of the modern world, and they think Mickey just happens to have one lying around just so nobody gets their hair damp. People also think that Cinderella's castle gets disassembled anytime there's a major storm, because reasons, I guess. Outside Stockholm there's a place called Birka that now is an outdoors museum, since it was an important Viking Age trading center between California 750 AD and 975 AD. Of course not much is left. It's a museum and an archaeological site. Still, American tourists come and are really disappointed with the boring UNESCO World Heritage Site and ask, well, this is all very nice, but can we go to the Viking town now? As if they're still living Vikings hanging around in their own reservation somehow. I once worked as a tour guide in Edinburgh. At 1 PM every day the 1 o'clock gun is fired from Edinburgh Castle. I have been asked more times than I can count, what time does the 1 o'clock gun go off? I also loved being asked when Scottish people celebrate New Year's Eve. I thought she was joking, so I said the 25th of July. She wasn't joking. One of my dad's coworkers worked a ticket booth thing in Yellowstone for a summer. When and where do you release the bears? And at what elevation do deer turn into elk? And the two questions I remember. I'm pretty sure a lot of these are just people messing with you. Every time I go anywhere as a tourist with me dad, he asks the tour guide the dumbest questions, just for shits and giggles. We were at Claude Monet's garden and he asked, so when do we get to meet Claude? And the guy said he's dead, and my dad was like, OMG, I'm so sorry, and acted really awkward. I've asked a tour guide this question during a rafting trip, and she said to often come up. 1. Does a river go in a circle? 2. When does low/high tide start? Typically from people who live near the ocean. Not a tour, but worked at fish and chips place on Seattle waterfront swarming with tourists. Him, how many pieces of fish in the 3-piece fish and chips? Me, since it's Tuesday, we do 3. Feels elbow bump from manager. Not a guide, but I work in a busy tourist attraction in Niagara Falls. It's really common to be asked what time they turn the falls off at, and if they shut them off during the winter. I've been asked if they dye the watercolors at night, lights are shone on them. I've also been asked, so what country are we in again? It was an American who asked, lol. If I'm going to be honest, tourists can be some of the most entitled and ignorant people I've come across. I have some great stories about some of those jerks. New tour guide at Mount Rushmore was once asked if they take down Mount Rushmore and pack it inside Rushmore Cave during the winter. I was a tour bus driver up in Juneau, Alaska. I did exclusively cruise ship passengers and most of them were older and chose to go on a cruise ship because everything is taken care of for them and they don't need to think, so naturally I got a bunch. The most common ones were, do you guys take American money? What elevation are we at? This was immediately after they got off their ship. Or why is the glacier so dirty? The worst one I ever heard though was, what does clear weather have to do with flying safely? This was after a woman unloaded on me because her helicopter tour got cancelled because of fog and was looking for someone to yell at. I didn't even work for that company. Not a guide, but on a tour of Berlin, concerning Third Reich. American tourist, what side of the Berlin Wall did Hitler live on? Freaking incredible. I have 2. I worked at a colonial American historic house museum and gave tours in addition to working in collections. 1. I was giving a tour to a rather large group of people on a smoldering July weekend. Of course the home was refit with air conditioning, but even then it was still pretty steamy in there. One person, a man probably around 40 or so, asked me, so is the air conditioning authentic to when the house was built? 2. We had a little miniature copy of the Declaration of Independence, which I would pick up and reference at a certain point in the tour. One kid, probably around 20, and from England or Ireland, raised his hand and asked, so is that the original Declaration of Independence? I responded, no, I'm afraid not. No one knows where it is, since Nicolas Cage nabbed it back in 2002. I was working at a major tourist attraction in Canada. There were guides to the attraction in maybe 15 different languages that were free to take, all organized in a display. The guides in English were marked English. The guides in other languages were all marked with the word for the language in that language and graphics of 1 or 2 flags from where that language is most commonly spoken. For instance, Espanol and the Spanish and Mexican flags. An American tourist walks up and demands to know where the guides are in American. Dogs for tours here. Surprisingly had a few people ask how we tell whether the dogs were male or female, lol. I have a funny tour guide story. My friend's little sister was a tour guide for Ruby Falls. It's a long cave tour that ends with a giant underground waterfall. They put lights up on it and play music and stuff. When you get to it, there is a pool of water at the bottom of the falls. The tour guides tell everyone every time not to drink the water. Because of the high mineral content, it will act like laxative. They always assure you won't make it to the bathroom in time. I think they must know this because some people tested that theory. But one time that took the cake for her was these Hispanic men just jumped into the pool at the bottom of the waterfall and started swimming/bathing in it. She was just a young girl that did not speak Spanish, was not sure how to get them out. It was very awkward. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content.